So based on the texts, how would the author of text 1 most likely respond to proponents or supporters, advocates of the philosophical stance outlined in text 2? So here I'm actually going to read text 2 first, so we'll know what it is that the author of text 1 would be responding to. Okay, so text 2 says, external world skepticism is a philosophical stance supposing that we cannot be sure of the existence of anything outside of our own minds. During a lecture, G.E. Moore once offered a proof refuting this stance by, holding out his hands and saying, here is one hand and here is another. Okay, in other words, I think he's saying, I can see that I have a hand in front of me and another hand, and I'm sure of this, and so I'm not skeptical about it. Therefore, I can show that this philosophical stance is not really valid. But as it says in the last sentence, many philosophers reflexively or instinctively reject this proof. So someone called it an obviously annoying failure, but they have found it a challenge to articulate exactly why the proof fails. So what is the philosophical stance outlined in text 2? It is external world skepticism. I'm just going to say that's what we want to take with us into text 1 because we want to see what text 1 says about external world skepticism. So philosopher G.E. Moore's most influential work entails the concept of common sense. Entails, almost like necessitates, requires, implies, something in that ballpark. So he asserts that there are certain beliefs that all people, including philosophers, know instinctively to be true, whether or not they profess or claim otherwise. So among them, the idea that we, individuals, have bodies, that we exist in a world with other objects that have 3 dimensions, things like that. So Moore's careful work on common sense may seem obvious, but was in fact groundbreaking. And that gives you a little glimpse into the weird world of philosophy, as it can sometimes seem, at least. So the idea here is that text 2 tells us a little bit about what external world skepticism is, namely that we cannot be sure of the existence of anything outside our own minds. But text 1 says there are certain things that we know instinctively to be true, including the idea that we exist in a world with other objects, etc. And so basically what the first passage is saying is that external world skepticism conflicts with common sense. Regardless of whether one can formulate a rigorous proof of the fact that the fact that I have hands and that I can hold my hands out in front of me and look at them. Maybe I can't prove that in the same way that I could prove something in geometry by pointing to different theorems and postulates and whatnot. But he's saying, it's just common sense and we don't need a proof for it. So we go to the answer choices, and our correct answer is going to be A. He would assert that external world skepticism is at odds with or conflicts with other beliefs those proponents must unavoidably hold. Inevitably hold. Again, what are those beliefs? The idea that we as individuals have bodies, that we exist in the 3-dimensional world. Why did these proponents unavoidably hold those beliefs? It's kind of like, they get up in the morning, you eat food, you certainly act as if you are in an external world with external objects and that you have a body, and I'm not being consistent with my pronoun usage, you, they. We humans have these common sense beliefs about the world, whether or not we spell them out in rigorous philosophical arguments or not. And so that is what's going on with answer choice A. But if we look at the others, B says that the author of text 1 would argue that if it is valid to assert that some facts are true based on instinct, it is also valid to assert that some proofs are. This is gobbledygook. What is it doing here? It's borrowing a word, instinct, that appears in this passage, but everything else about it is kind of almost like nonsense in the sense that neither passage is saying anything about what's valid to assert based on instinct. Some proofs are inadequate. I mean, it's just making a distinction that is not made in either passage. And then C, by agreeing with those proponents, no, because passage 1 supports more. The second passage is, I think, critical of more, or at least cites someone who is critical of more, but they're not going to agree. And then D, by suggesting that an instinctive distaste for More's position is preventing external world skeptics from constructing a sufficiently rigorous refutation of More. And so, no. I'm looking to see, are there other words, refutation, refuting? They're again borrowing some words that appear in the passage. Reflexively, instinctively, again. But this is not at all what the author of the first passage would say. The author of the first passage is not saying that their distaste for More's position is preventing them from constructing a sufficiently rigorous refutation. The author of the first passage would say that these are things that don't need proofs. Therefore, coming up with a rigorous refutation is sort of missing the point. The author of the first passage would say these things are just true, they're common sense, they don't need to be proven, and so answer here will be A.